The fluorescent lights never turn off in the women's section of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. They hum at a frequency that settles into the bones, a constant reminder that even darkness has been taken away. The cameras watch from corners, where walls meet ceilings, their red lights blinking like eyes that never need to sleep. This is safety, they say. This is protection. But the women who live under this constant surveillance know better. They know that visibility doesn't mean being seen, that being watched doesn't mean being protected, that in places where everything is recorded, the worst violations often happen in plain sight, dressed in the language of procedure and protocol. We tell ourselves that the age of dungeons is over, that modern society has evolved beyond the barbarism of medieval justice. We've replaced stone cells with concrete ones, chains with electronic monitoring, torture wheels with psychiatric medications. But for women in prison, the fundamental reality remains unchanged. They exist in spaces where their bodies are controlled by others, where their voices are silenced by systems, where their suffering is considered part of the punishment, deserved and unremarkable. The methods have been modernized, sanitized, made legally defensible. But the underlying truth persists. Imprisoned women remain society's most vulnerable population, hidden behind walls where abuse thrives in the shadows of institutional indifference. Walk through any women's prison in America, in Russia, in Thailand, in Brazil, and you'll find the same architecture of control, adapted to local customs, but serving universal purposes. The intake process strips away identity with mechanical efficiency. Women arrive as mothers, daughters, professionals, addicts, survivors, each with complex histories that led them to this moment. Within hours, they're reduced to numbers, dressed in identical uniforms, their personal belongings cataloged and locked away. The message is clear from the first moment. You are no longer who you were. You are what we make you. The vulnerability begins immediately. Strip searches, conducted for security, become rituals of humiliation. Male guards often oversee or conduct these examinations, their presence a reminder that privacy is a privilege the imprisoned woman has forfeited. Body cavities are examined with rough efficiency, dignity dissolved in the name of contraband prevention. Standing naked in cold rooms while strangers probe their bodies. The clinical nature of the violation makes it no less violating. This is where the first lesson is taught. Their bodies are no longer their own, but physical searches are just the beginning. In prisons across the world, male guards supervise showers, conduct nighttime cell checks, oversee dress and undress. The policies vary by country, by state, by facility. But the result is the same. Women in constant states of exposure, never able to fully clothe themselves in privacy, always aware of eyes that might be watching, officially or otherwise. Quick showers, dressing under blankets, never fully relaxing even in spaces designated as private. The statistics tell one story. Sexual assault in women's prisons is reported at rates 4 times higher than in men's facilities. But statistics only capture what's reported, what's documented, what makes it through layers of institutional silence. The real story lives in whispered warnings passed between cellmates, in unwritten rules about which guards to avoid being alone with, which shifts bring danger, which corridors to never walk down without witnesses. Every woman who's spent time inside knows these maps of danger that exist nowhere in official documentation. Power in women's prisons operates through currencies, both obvious and subtle. Guards control everything. Phone privileges that connect mothers to children, medical care for chronic conditions, protection from violent inmates. work assignments that can mean the difference between affording commissary or going without basic hygiene products. In this economy of desperation, those with power become gods of small but crucial mercies. A guard who can ensure a woman gets her psychiatric medication on time holds power over not just comfort, but survival itself. The exploitation that follows is systematic, predictable, and rarely documented. A correctional officer might offer extra phone time, but the price is paid in privacy, in compliance, in silence about what happens during late-night cell checks. A guard might provide protection from violent inmates, but protection requires gratitude expressed in ways that leave no physical evidence. A supervisor might ensure medical care reaches a diabetic inmate, but medical care comes with expectations that transform healthcare into another tool of coercion. The navigation becomes careful calculation. Accepting help from the wrong guard marks you as available. Refusing all assistance marks you as difficult, subject to retaliation through official channels. Disciplinary reports for fabricated infractions, transfers to worse units, loss of good time credits. The path to survival becomes a tightrope walk over an abyss of exploitation, where one false step means falling into cycles of abuse from which there's no escape that doesn't involve further punishment. Mental health in women's prisons becomes both a crisis and a tool of control. The majority of incarcerated women have histories of trauma, abuse, mental illness that predates their imprisonment. The prison environment exacerbates these conditions, but seeking help means exposure to psychiatric systems that often prioritize management over treatment. Women who report sexual abuse might find themselves medicated for paranoia. Those who resist exploitation might be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. The medical record becomes another weapon, documenting mental illness that can be used to discredit any allegations. Pregnancy in prison reveals particular cruelties reserved for incarcerated women, shackled during transport to medical appointments, sometimes even during labor itself. The babies born in prison hospitals are usually taken within hours or days. Women recover from childbirth in cells where no one acknowledges their loss. Their milk comes in with no child to feed. Their bodies recovering from birth while their minds fracture from separation. Some never see their children again. Isolation units in women's prisons serve multiple purposes, not all of them official. Solitary confinement, supposedly used for disciplinary or protective reasons, becomes a tool for silencing victims of abuse. Those who report sexual assault often find themselves in protective custody that's indistinguishable from punishment. 23 hours of isolation, limited access to programs or communication, effectively buried alive for their own protection. The message is clear. Speaking up means disappearing into concrete boxes where no one can hear you scream. International trafficking of women prisoners adds another layer to this systematic exploitation. In Southeast Asian prisons, foreign women, often arrested for drug trafficking after being coerced by boyfriends or handlers, find themselves especially vulnerable. Without embassy support, without understanding the language or legal system, they become perfect victims for those who prey on the powerless. Guards sell access to these women, sometimes to other inmates, sometimes to visitors, creating markets of exploitation that operate with near impunity. Transgender women in prison face particular horrors, often housed in men's facilities where they experience sexual violence at rates that should shame any civilized society. When they're housed in women's facilities, they face different but still severe vulnerabilities. Targeted by both inmates and staff, who view them as curiosities, aberrations, or opportunities. Their bodies become battlegrounds for ideological conflicts they never asked to be part of. Indigenous women in prisons across North America, Australia, and New Zealand experience incarceration at rates that reveal the ongoing legacy of colonization, separated from cultural supports, forbidden from practicing traditional ceremonies. They face not just imprisonment, but cultural erasure. The exploitation carries echoes of residential schools and historical traumas. Their bodies and minds subjected to controls that seek to destroy not just individual will, but collective identity. The night shift in women's prisons brings particular dangers: skeleton crews, sleeping inmates, cameras that mysteriously malfunction. These create opportunities for predators in uniform. Survivors recount lying awake, listening for footsteps, recognizing walk patterns of different guards, knowing which ones stop too long at their cells, which ones have keys that jingle in ways that signal danger. Sleeping fully clothed, sometimes in multiple layers, creating whatever barriers they can. Some never really sleep at all, existing in states of constant vigilance that destroy mental health as surely as any torture. Commissary becomes another tool of exploitation. Women's prisons often provide inadequate hygiene supplies, forcing inmates to purchase basic necessities: tampons, soap, toilet paper. Those without money must find ways to earn it. And in environments where legal work pays pennies per hour, illegal economies flourish. Guards who control access to commissary hold enormous power over women's basic dignity and health. Religious programs in women's prisons, supposedly sources of comfort and rehabilitation, sometimes become hunting grounds for different kinds of predators. Chaplains and religious volunteers, granted special access and trust, have been found to exploit vulnerable women seeking spiritual comfort. The promise of redemption becomes entangled with coercion, salvation offered in exchange for compliance, God's forgiveness seemingly dependent on accepting violation from those who claim to represent divine authority. The retaliation against women who resist or report abuse follows predictable patterns: sudden transfers to facilities far from family support, loss of prison jobs that provide the only income for phone calls home, placement in units with known dangerous inmates, denial of parole with vague references to attitude problems, or failure to accept responsibility. The woman who speaks up often faces consequences worse than the original abuse, teaching others through her example that silence is the only survivable option. Medical care becomes another avenue for exploitation and neglect. Former inmates report being forced to expose themselves unnecessarily for basic medical treatment, invasive examinations conducted without proper cause, medication withheld unless they comply with inappropriate requests, chronic conditions go untreated, cancers undiagnosed, psychiatric medications given or denied based on behavior rather than medical need. The body becomes a site of punishment, even when it's supposedly being treated. The mothers in prison carry particular vulnerabilities. Over 60% of women in U.S. prisons have children under 18. The threat of losing parental rights becomes the ultimate tool of coercion. Guards and administrators who control phone access, who write reports that influence custody decisions, who can facilitate or prevent video calls with children, hold the power to destroy families, agreeing to things they would never otherwise accept, submitting to degradations they would normally resist, all to maintain some connection to children who are growing up without them. Strip clubs inside prisons might sound like fiction, but investigations have revealed facilities where women were forced to dance for guards, perform in states of undress for prison staff parties, participate in entertainment that was filmed and distributed. These operations, when discovered, are described as isolated incidents. bad apples in otherwise functional systems, but survivors know better. These extreme examples are just visible peaks of icebergs that extend deep below the surface of official oversight. The elderly women in prison, a rapidly growing population, face unique vulnerabilities. Many are serving life sentences for crimes committed in different eras, when domestic violence was ignored and women who killed abusive partners received no consideration. Now in their 70s and 80s, they're easy targets, too frail to resist, too tired to report, often forgotten by an outside world that's moved on without them. They die in prison hospitals, sometimes shackled to beds. Their last vision, the same concrete walls they've stared at for decades. Young women, some barely 18, enter prisons that become their education in survival through submission. They learn from older inmates how to navigate the predators, which guards to avoid eye contact with, how to make themselves invisible or useful, but never vulnerable. But innocence in prison is like blood in water, attracting those who feed on naivety and fear. The girl who enters prison at 18 emerges, if she emerges, aged beyond her years, carrying knowledge no one should have about how power operates when no one's watching. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed how quickly women's prisons could become death traps, locked in cells with inadequate protection, denied basic hygiene supplies. Women watched as the virus spread through facilities like wildfire. But even in pandemic, the exploitation continued. Masks became currency. Hand sanitizer was contraband. Protection from infection became another tool for coercion. Forced to choose between exposure to disease and exposure to abuse, their health just another bargaining chip in economies of survival. The private prison industry adds profit motive to these systems of exploitation. Women become commodities, their bodies generating revenue through per diem payments from governments. The longer they stay incarcerated, the more they're worth. Programs that might reduce recidivism become less valuable than systems that ensure return customers. In this corporate structure, rehabilitation isn't just deprioritized, it's counterproductive to the business model. Those released describe a particular kind of haunting. They can't sleep without lights on because darkness reminds them of cells. They can't shower without checking repeatedly that they're alone. They can't accept kindness without calculating its cost. The exploitation has rewired their brains, taught them that human connection comes with price tags, that safety is always temporary, that their bodies are currency in economies they can never fully escape. The guards who perpetrate these abuses go home to families, attend churches, shop in grocery stores alongside us. They're not monsters from medieval dungeons, but modern professionals who've learned that certain populations exist outside the protection of law and conscience. They've discovered that society has designated spaces where abuse is not just tolerated, but expected, where women's suffering is considered part of their punishment, deserved by virtue of their crimes or simply their presence in these spaces. International human rights organizations have documented these abuses repeatedly. Reports pile up in offices. Investigations conclude with recommendations for reform. Policies are written and rewritten, but the fundamental structure remains unchanged. Women in enclosed spaces controlled by those who can exploit them with near impunity. The reforms are band-aids on cancer, surface changes that leave the underlying disease untouched. The women's prison in Chowchilla, California, the largest in the world, houses over 3,000 women. The suicide rates speak to despair so profound that death seems preferable to continued existence. The self-harm statistics reveal women so desperate to feel anything other than institutional numbness that they open their own veins. The psychiatric ward overflows with women whose minds have broken under weights they were never meant to carry. But these aren't stories from distant countries or extreme facilities. These are common experiences across the spectrum of women's incarceration, from county jails to federal prisons, from pretrial detention to death row. Women navigate systems of exploitation that operate through official procedures and unofficial expectations, through written policies and unwritten rules, through visible surveillance and invisible violence. The recidivism rates for women tell their own story. They return not because crime is their nature, but because prison has taught them they're worthless beyond their ability to survive exploitation. They've learned that their bodies are their only currency, that trust is dangerous, that authority exists to be endured rather than respected. Prison hasn't corrected them. It's confirmed their worst experiences of power and taught them that exploitation is the natural order of things. Today, at this very moment, a woman sits in a cell somewhere, calculating whether reporting the guard who assaulted her is worth the retaliation that will surely follow. Another lies awake, listening for footsteps, knowing that tonight might be the night her luck runs out. Another stands in a shower, washing quickly while eyes watch through windows that shouldn't exist. Another accepts medication she doesn't need, because refusing means losing phone privileges with children she hasn't seen in years. These women aren't characters in historical fiction about medieval dungeons. They're our contemporaries, living in facilities funded by our tax dollars, overseen by our governments, operating according to our collective decisions about who deserves protection and who deserves whatever happens to them when society looks away. Their suffering isn't ancient history. It's today's news that no one reports, tonight's violence that no one prevents, tomorrow's trauma that no one will acknowledge. The evolution from medieval dungeons to modern prisons hasn't eliminated the exploitation of imprisoned women. It's simply professionalized it, systematized it, made it deniable through bureaucratic language and institutional procedures. We've replaced the torturer's tools with psychological manipulation, the rack with restraint chairs, the dungeon master with correctional officers who clock in and out of shifts where women's bodies and minds are broken according to schedule. History will judge us not by our technological advances or our democratic ideals, but by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. And if history is honest, it will record that we learned nothing from the dungeons of the past except how to hide our dungeons better, how to conduct our cruelties more quietly, how to destroy women's lives while maintaining plausible deniability about what happens in places we've agreed not to look. The women who survive these modern dungeons emerge carrying invisible scars that will never fully heal. They return to societies that expect them to be grateful for their freedom, without understanding what freedom actually means. Not just the ability to walk through unlocked doors, but the ability to exist without constant fear. To trust that kindness doesn't come with hidden costs. To believe that their bodies belong to them alone. These are freedoms that prison has stolen in ways that no completion of sentence can restore. If you seek the truths hidden in the corners of our modern world, the stories that unfold in spaces we've designated as necessary evils, the voices of women who've been silenced by systems that operate in our names, with our funding and our implicit permission, subscribe to Prison Diaries. Because these aren't tales from history, they're reports from the present, warnings about the future, and calls to acknowledge what we allow to happen when we decide that some humans deserve whatever befalls them behind walls we've built to hide our own capacities for cruelty.